Alright, guys. Alright, so if you're wondering what this giant country is, but you're probably gonna wanna leave the video or else you're just gonna get spoiled about my Wixo, but this is the strongest country in my Wixo so far. And now we're seeing what if they were in real life. Alright, so let's stop wasting time and get straight into the video. So first, we probably would see them just invading, like, all of their neighbors, since they are also extremely expansionist. So we would just see them invading a lot of their weak neighbors. But they also are pretty confused. So after their much crazy confusion, they just decide to invade everyone they border. We see them pushing up into South Sudan until we see Sudan joining the war on their own side just to invade South Sudan. But we see that they're just gonna be invading all of these weaker neighbors. So then they invade the Uruguay. And yeah, we will just do the peace treaty here. Yeah, we see that they split South Sudan with normal Sudan, which I'll uncolor them in a second. Alright, so there's that invasion. Down here, and finally over here. I can uncolor Sudan. Alright, so that was just Kenya cleaning up all the tiny countries around them. But now they're probably gonna go after maybe the DRC. Yeah, they probably would go after the DRC and Republic of the Congo, or whatever that country's name is. You see them blitzing through before and kind of scaring Angola a lot. And then the peace treaty. So that's what the peace treaty is. It's just full annexation. But then we see that Yeah, they're invading quite a lot of countries. They might be biting off too much that they can't chew. Or too much, I don't know. But we see them pushing into, I forgot the country that exists there, before making multiple landings. Also, if you're wondering, they aren't using the old technology that they use in my Wixo. They're using modern technology, but they just don't have nukes and stuff like that. We see them blitzing through the Madagascar before invading down into South Africa. But South Africa will hold out with their entire military and probably some US, China, and Russia. So we end up seeing that they will push down, finally destroying South Africa. Also, these guys are probably like the fourth or third strongest country. They're probably just like right behind China. So we end up seeing that they will finally end up destroying these guys. And then the peace treaty is really simple. But this will be the peace treaty. And yeah, Angola is just scared, but then Kenya will offer them a alliance, which they accept, and then Kenya actually will gain a few allies, which one of them is in South. Actually, never mind, not them. Yep, Brazil. So this will be Kenya's allies, and then their first. Now there will probably be many coalitions, but this is the first of those coalitions, which it's probably being funded by the US, Russia, and China again, and maybe Israel, and maybe friends in the UK. But we actually see that they will have some success in the north as they push down south, managing to take Sudan's coast and even push out from Chad. And Sudan will ask Kenya for some aid, which then Kenya will start sending some aid, allowing them to do a counter-offensive up here, retaking the coast. While Kenya is just focusing on getting Nigeria out of existence. As we see them pushing in, taking the southern part. And then they push up north, taking this. Before they just continue blitzing through into Nigeria. Now we're probably seeing some regret from like Libya and Egypt, as this country is no joke. But more aid from America, Russia, and China will arrive, allowing them to do a counteroffensive right there, but that's quickly stalled out and then pushed right back. And then Kenyan forces will start pouring into Chad. Which then the coalition will quickly retreat from Chad. Chad is just a lost cause. So we see Chad will end up collapsing before the Red Alliance or Coalition just goes in and occupies Chad before Kenya can fully do it. We see them now trying to push back against Kenya before we see another country entering the war, which it is these guys, and also France. I'm not sure what France is doing, but they're pretty crazy, I guess. I guess they're schizophrenic. But yeah, we just don't see Brazil having the best day ever, as they are quickly invaded and a lot of special forces from all around the world are right in the Amazon. But then Kenyan forces will arrive, instantly pushing those special forces back. And apparently their Brazilians are just focusing on Guyana. So we see them just full focusing on Guyana, which is gonna allow them to also push into here, which will not be too good for the red guys, as they are fully kicked out before being invaded right there. And then Brazilian forces will continue straight up into Venezuela, and they will make a landing around here until the USA will join in on the war on their own side. Now, they aren't at war with any of these guys, they're only really at war with, like, these three. But we see the US will try to just take land so that Brazil doesn't get more land. But we see that the US will make a ton of landings across here, but they will struggle on getting across these mountains in Peru. But we see them pushing deeper into Colombia before landing right here in Venezuela, before the Brazilians end up going and cutting off the US. And then we just see a large amount of soldiers surrendering right there before Venezuela will end up just surrendering. And then Brazilian forces will start pushing into here, causing a slight retreat right here. And we see that the beat back the Peru guys. And most countries have pulled their aid out of these South American countries just because of how just cooked they are. But we see that Brazil ends up taking the rest. Now we can continue with this front line, as Kenyan forces will quickly blitz up north into Libya, and then also continue blitzing up through Chad, now entering like the harsher Sahara Desert, which they will struggle more in. Really, they would struggle a lot because of how different the climate is in this world. But we see that the first invasions of Egypt will start before Egypt ends up making a deal, and then they just end up leaving the war. Egypt has left the war, where now Libya can start to just die before they just surrender or leave the war, which they choose to just surrender. No, wait, no, leave the war. And then France is just like, bro, you're not invading me. Then Kenya's like, sure. And France is like, oh no. So yeah. Now we can see a peace treaty. So this is the peace treaty. Also, there isn't a war. It's just like an alliance made to stop Kenyan expansion. So yeah. Also, there would probably be a few puppet states by now, and Kenya will send an ultimatum to this country saying, become my puppet state or I will just obliterate you. And they are like, okay, we surrender, chill. So yeah, that's just sad for that guy. But we see that Ethiopia will end up joining this, like, anti-Kenyan alliance. Also, Algeria and Tunisia. And you know you're cooked. You know everyone hates you when you have Taiwan and China working together. And North Korea and South Korea working together. And Japan and North Korea working together. And even the US and Russia and China working together. But also, they're just cooked if there's a war because they have Liechtenstein. So yeah, they're just cooked. But don't worry, they have the mighty nation of Mongolia, and Mongolia they will instantly blitz the entire world in the matter of 0.00001 seconds. Psych. You thought I would end this video like that? Also, they have, like, India, which I don't know why this isn't covered. Alright, now they have but we probably can get Sri Lanka and here. But fear not. They may have India, but we have Pakistan too. Oh, there goes our oil. So we end up seeing that they will just jump these two guys right there. Yeah, I think they're tiny, just a tiny little bit cooked. Now Kenya probably told them to invade Iraq and what's their name? Iraq and this guy, because it would just mean they controlled all the oil basically. So yeah, bro. But yeah, the peace treaty. The peace treaty isn't that nice to these two. They were just chilling, but now they're dead. So that will likely be the peace treaty. So yeah. But we probably will have Israel joining on the anti-Kenyan alliance. But then, in response... Oh, wait, wrong layer. But in response, we would have Palestine joining on this alliance. Can I freaking color in the right thing? Also, I said freaking, not the F word. So even though Russia and Ukraine are at war, and Belarus would join, and these two just because Turkey and Russia. But then we see more Kenyan expansion, as now they will just declare war on basically all of West Africa. So it's not a very fun day to be West African. But also it's not fun to be Chilean or Somalian, since they're about to be just obliterated. So first we see that Chile is just obliterated in a matter of like 0.001 seconds, because of just how bad their border is. But then we end up seeing now Kenya's doing its own invasion. Also, tell me in the live chat what country we should do next. But we see that the Golden Coast will end up just collapsing, as Kenya just realizes that they can just invade the coast and all these countries are cooked. But fear not, Algeria is coming to help, I think. Oh wait, no, Algeria is coming to kill. So we end up seeing Algeria now invading, before these countries will just surrender to Algeria. Now we can see a peace treaty. Big Kenya. Big Kenya. Alright, so here's the peace treaty. We see Algeria getting a ton of land. We see Kenya uniting these countries, and Kenya annexing a ton of land. And then Argentina and Bolivia becoming coastal, basically. As this gained independence, by the way, so it's not Argentina. So yeah, so Kenya is probably like the biggest country, as we can see, but we see Kenya will declare war on these countries. World War III. Yeah, so about that. Kenya might have a little tiny problem. Just a little tiny problem. Also, this is controlled by America. It's not Colombia, it's America. But this is... So, yeah. But we end up seeing that Kenya will still be able to easily blitz through these countries right here. And... yeah. So... we see them having a little bit of trouble with Pakistan, since there's a lot of Chinese soldiers in Pakistan, And yeah, Mongolia has just cooked. Mongolia and Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is like, wait, Russia, don't do this, please. Russia, no. And then Russia's like, you betrayed me, so I will kill you. So, yeah. We see Mongolia and Kazakhstan quickly collapse, while Turkey and Russia and most of Europe will focus on Persia or Iran. And they're pretty successful until Kenyan forces end up arriving. Can I select the right color? But we see that they will start pushing back up here, or encircling a ton of soldiers right here, killing them off. We see a quick and easy pushback right there. And yeah, you can probably see how cooked these countries are. So yeah, Kenyan forces will end up blitzing through Jordan. Also, I removed all the nukes, but countries can still make nukes. Until we see that. Wait, let me just delete these guys. Libya can survive, and Algeria too. But we see that Russia, USA, and China, they will end up making a nuclear bomb. And they end up dropping a few on Kenya. But in response, Kenya ends up doing a ton of research on nukes. And yeah, we see that a nuclear war is kind of beginning to take shape. But then USA ends up getting nuked with a way stronger nuclear bomb, which is like maybe half the strength of the T-SAR bomb. Wait. The T-SAR bomba. But then Russia ends up using like all of its uranium that it's gone from like Kazakhstan to make one of the strongest nukes ever. But since it's Russia, ends up crashing into probably right there. So yeah, their plan was to nuke Kenya's capital, which is probably like right somewhere here. But yeah. So now the US is just mad, but they end up discovering a way to make it NNHRB, which they end up using about 3 on Kenya. But Kenya ends up making a way weaker NNHRB and dropping it on Moscow. So yeah, Moscow's dead, and also they drop a few. But don't worry, North Korea is launching all of its nukes nuclear bombs, they just end up, yeah, so that's not very good. Also, died from this attack. And the 5 people were just people that were launching it, but then the nuclear bomb just fell on them. So yeah. But fear not, China's gonna launch a nuclear bomb at India. But India, in response, ends up nuking Pakistan. In response, so we end up seeing that countries will just end up running out of nuclear bombs eventually, which would probably look like this. Alright, Liechtenstein. This barrage thing that just happened would look like. But now they ran out of nukes. So now they have to go back to conventional warfare. You see them taking probably this microstate that formed, or surrounding it. But now Algeria is like, uh-oh. And Tunisia is now invaded. And Tunisia is just not having a good time. We see many invasions on here. So yeah, they're just not having the greatest time. We see Kenyan forces will finally manage to enter Russia before they end up just invading Georgia, because why not? But Russia will manage to finally hold off Kenyan forces right there. But after a bit, Kenya will actually start to get pushed back on all fronts. So we see that they are completely kicked out of Italy before being invaded up over here, and multiple landings will happen here. Oh wait, that's... So we see a landing right there, and then the first more successful invasions, and America will finally manage to end the stalemate that was happening over here. See them blitzing through Bolivia before trying to just blitz through the Amazon, but they aren't very successful. So we see America will just do a naval invasion right here on the coast of Brazil before Brazil ends up just surrendering, which now Kenya's like super mad, and Kenya will end up telling its forces to invade into here, but instead the forces end up just switching sides, rebelling against Kenya. So now Kenya has none of its special South American forces anymore, and now Kenya is starting to panic a little bit. But over here, this was already occupied. But now we see India and Iran are kicked out of Pakistan before the jumping of India will begin, as American forces that were secretly in Bangladesh will end up pushing out from all sides. but they end up pushing out from all sides, and then pretend this is occupied. We see that Kashmir ends up being captured, and if there were any nukes left in the world, then India would use it to just destroy Pakistan and China. But since there's no more nukes, we see multiple invasions of India before India finally surrenders. And Kenya's starting to run out of military forces before a rebellions start appearing in southern Africa and Madagascar, which are likely being funded by certain but these rebellions will spread across southern Kenya, before Kenya will end up just giving these guys independence. But then it ends up backfiring as they immediately declare war. Why is it hard? But they end up immediately declaring war on Kenya again, and Kenya's like, bro, why? And then they're like, scammers get scammed. And then they begin invading into Kenya. Before this lake is captured, and Kenya's demise is certain, as most of their forces over here, they are kicked out. And then these guys end up switching sides. Before just most of Kenya's alliance switches sides, which now Kenya's starting to panic, actually. We see forces pushing into there before a actual invasion of mainland Kenya will start, not by a rebellion. We see that they end up pushing out from the entire border, this is probably like a larger front than the Eastern Front in World War II. But now the red side knows that if they get Kenya out of the war, then everyone will just surrender. So they end up full focusing on Kenya, and they just have defensive stuff over here to hold off their allies, which this is successful as Kenya is now starting to collapse. More rebellions will end up popping up across the entire country, and now Kenya is about to collapse before Kenya finally surrenders. And then basically the entire alliance will end up surrendering. As I'm not doing a peace treaty, as it'd probably go back to how it was, but with just like a lot more countries appearing, especially in Brazil and their allies. But see you next time, because Kenya might be under your bed and Kenya might want to eat you because they're imperialist. So, yeah. Let's end this video, but Kenya will end up doing something like the dead hand thing, as, yeah, Kenya has secretly been making NNHRBs the entire time and they just launched the NNHRBs everywhere, and they were probably in like some sort of secret bunker before larger ones with like all of the stuff that are used. We see many of them end up missing though, but a lot of them do end up hitting their target. We see before just everything is destroyed. But fear not, Antarctica is gonna. Oh wait, never mind. Antarctica is not. Wait, never mind. Antarctica is gonna save the day. Antarctica begins beating up the NNHRBs, saving Africa. Then they save the Americas. And then they end up saving the world. But they end up sacrificing themselves. And also Kenya's still obliterated. And also just the entire Middle East. And Brazil. And just Europe. And especially Israel. Especially Israel. Alright, see you next time.